good evening to each one of you on the panel and the people who have logged in. And I'm sure the people who will be watching this video later on the Shared Services Forum portal. Very warm welcome to each one of you. My name is Rakesh Sinha, and I'm very fortunate today to host this panel of an eminent leaders across different industry, bringing 120 plus years kind of an experience to this panel. So I'm a little scared as well to how to manage the time and how to manage the flow of the conversation, because each one of them can talk for an hour on any point. So we have to manage the conversation. And few of you would not be able to connect with us in terms of this conversation. You have one way to connect with us is the Q&A. You have an application Q&A, and you can post your questions. You can even direct a question to any of the respected panelists, and they can just take those questions. We'll try to see how much we can cover your questions during the conversation. Stepping back a little bit just to share with you, and many of you will be regulars to the Shared Services Forum summits and the events. Shared Services Forum is now in the 10th year. The year which we would like to celebrate the most. At the same point of time, we are a little, if I can say, challenged with the current COVID situation, that we can't meet physically with many of you this year. We are still keeping our fingers crossed that we'll have an opportunity to meet sometime sooner or later in this 10th year of the Shared Services Forum. As part of the Shared Services Forum, the ethos goes, it's all about disseminating the knowledge, bringing the best practices, the next practices of the people, the diversified industries, how they are looking at the current scenarios, how they are preparing themselves for the next, and so on and so forth. This summit is a 2 days focus, starting with this panel first, today and tomorrow. A couple of sessions today, a couple of sessions tomorrow. It's called Digital Leadership Summit. Even though it's called digital, our focus is more business, if I can say. We surely want to connect with digital, but we want to connect surely with business. That's the focus with which we will start this conversation. And as I said, I have a very eminent panel on the screen. You can see with me. These gentlemen have joined from different locations and different roles and played different avatars in the past their illustrious career. I have Sarajit with me. He is Chief Business Transformation and Digital Solutions, Tata Steel. I have Harishankar. He is VP IT Architecture, Engineering and Corporate Functions, Kimberly Clark. I have Pramod Agarwal, VP and Regional CTO, Automation Anywhere. And I have Amar, Hunjan, former CIO, Director, ISNG Compass Group, Asia Pac. So with this, and I know all of those who have registered have got the profiles of each of the panelists circulated. So you may can read the profile in the detail, as you will already have the profiles with you. I think there's a slide already on the screen saying that the topic of this panel, is going to deliberate about how to look at holistic readiness for the process automation and digitalization. I think, guys, before we started the panel, I was talking about two specific words I want to stress on. One is the imperative for metamorphosis. And the second I want to stress on is this holistic readiness as a part of this conversation. This panel will obviously feed to the overall 2 days theme. The theme of this 2 days is future of work, how the work is going to look like in future with this changing technology landscape. With this, I move on to my panelists and request the host to take this slide off the screen. I move on to my panelists and I'll request first Sarajit, and I'll go to you, Sarajit, and you are representing a multifaceted, large organization, multi-location, multi-entities, whatever you call it. And then when we talk about this word holistic, the holistic readiness, what it by design means is 360 degree. The customer, product, business services, technology, multiple other dimensions. So when you wear this hat of digital strategy, digital transformation for an organization like that, how do you look at holistic readiness? How do you prepare for that holistic readiness to plan for your digital strategy and digital transformation? If you can share a bit of a thought on that, it will be helpful, and then we can build the conversation, Sarajit. So over to you, Sarajit.
Thank you, Rakesh. Thank you for having me here. And at the outset, I would like to wish all my co-panelists and everybody who's listening into this, that they are safe, that they are, holistically well off before, because I think it's first important to connect as humans, and then it's followed by business and not the other way around. And I think that also segues into our concept. So there are certain core philosophies that we have had. So one core philosophy we have is we are a 110-year-old startup. Every day is new. If every day is new, then we need to have opening day requirements, the ODRs ready. And ODRs will be ready when you're looking at some very simple facets of life. It's people, process, technology, and governance. And possibly not in that order. It should be people, governance, process, and then technology. Because anything that you do is all about humans. I think the most important, the other philosophy that we have is we don't believe in digital transformation. We believe always in business transformation. And we have been transforming ourselves over 110 years. Otherwise, we wouldn't have survived. But the fact that we are 110-year-old startup tells us that there's no guarantee that we will survive the next 10 years, 20 years in the form and fashion that we have always known. And I think that the intersection of that drives, a lot of things. It drives our value systems. It drives our people centricity. It drives our customer centricity. It drives our, we are very proud to be many years in running the world's most ethical corporation. And I think it permeates everything that we do. But interestingly, there are also a couple of personal philosophies of change that I've always had, because this is all about change. I mean, transformation is a very big word. Change is probably something that we can all relate to. And when you look at transformation, you have a concept of metamorphosis. It's the one single concept of transformation that strikes all of us is a caterpillar going into a butterfly. And we have realized many years ago that if you were to go and tell a caterpillar that, hey, you're going to become a butterfly, it'll probably freeze. So the way to do it, or the best way to do it that we know of, is to go and tell the butterfly that first, go and tell the caterpillar, you need to now freeze. You need to now cocoon yourself. You need to now be in the cocoon and rest there. Now you need to Now you need to check that you have wings. And you go, wow, I have wings. And now you need to flap those wings and try to do something called fly, which you never even imagined you can. So it's all about breaking this into simple doses and, staying that course on. Because if you tell people to transform, they will freeze. They will not transform. Or alternatively, they will have one of the 3F responses, 3F responses. Either they will fight, or they will flight, or they will freeze. And typically in good organizations with values, they freeze because they don't want to fight you. They are a part of you. And they don't want to flight because, we have very low attrition rates and people who join us tend to be with us. We like to believe we are an organization with a soul, and that really connects. So the third option happens is they freeze. So it's when you break this up into very small of these doses and make it very real. And just to give you an example, and I'll stop at that. So we had this COVID coming in, and we were running a very expansive $2 billion transformation program. We were investing in technology. We implemented 70 odd bots from our friends Automation Anywhere. And we were on course to hit $1 billion of transformation savings. We did not have line of sight to the next billion. And then COVID hit. And immediately in about 15 days, we came up with a new strategy. We said our new strategy is now PIC, which unfolds as platformatization. We will build 8 to 10 platforms because we can't support so many of these archetypes and products that we were building in-house, because we can't afford to go out to our typical partners in the droves and the scale that we were going to. Competencies, because if you need to do in-house, then you need to build those competencies in, and we really focused on building competencies, and I'm very proud of the way the team and the company has responded. And then there is the KPIs, because ultimately it's all about business. It's about savings. It's about keeping the lights on, as well as keeping the next steps of that caterpillar to butterfly journey, or what those 5 steps would be for us as it was for the caterpillar. So over to you, Rakesh. Thank you very much. And those would be my opening comments.
Well, thanks, Sarajit. I think it was fantastic to hear something like 100-year-old starter. And I think I'm sure many of us, if we don't take much, even from this content or the conversation, one thing for sure, will be using this quite often as 100-year-old startup. And the way you talked about the soul and believing that soul makes a lot of difference. I also heard a lot from you in terms of saying how that organizational sensitivities, the culture, the deep-rooted philosophy of the people has to be kept in the mind when you are driving this transformation or series of change, moving from a caterpillar to butterfly example. And that's the kind of multiple stages in between, and how you deal with those stages is very, very critical. And I have a question back on this point, but I'll come back to you. The question is basically more about why, you briefly touched upon the business transformation versus digital transformation, but I want to hold on with this question and come back to you after finishing with the other panelists, Sarajit. Moving on to you, Hari, just building on what Sarajit was talking about, that obviously it is important to understand the context of the organization, looking the organizational sensitivities, the culture, etc., and then building on your strategy. And obviously, being ready to even change quickly with the scenarios like COVID, which is unprecedented. For a minute, let's talk COVID, part of COVID for a minute. What is important is also, wanted to hear from you how you look at these large or mid-sized transformation, digital transformation program, when you're connecting with a holistic. When you say holistic, again, wanted to connect with your organizational priorities, your organizational focus. How is that linkage really you establish? How you go about that establishing the linkages by saying, this is my organizational priority, and hence this is the kind of strategy I need to have from a digital point of view. Just wanted to hear some perspective from you, Hari, on that.
No, thanks, Rakesh, and thanks, Sarajit, to hear from you. First of all, pleasure and privilege to be part of this forum, and look forward to rich interactions, and good afternoon to everybody who's dialed in and listening into this webinar in this virtual format that we have this year. Again, I am Harishankar. I represent Kimberly Clark. I was very interesting to hear Sarajit. We are also an organization with a very rich heritage, right? We are in our 148th year, so 2 years we hit 150 years. Headquartered in the US, but with operations and presence in practically every country, 175 countries. And one of the things really is, for companies like ours, right, is the strong sense of purpose, right? And for us, it is about, leading the world in essentials for better life. And especially in a situation like that we are going through today, right? It is a time when everybody starts looking at this deeper sense of purpose, right? And what does it mean for us, as employees, as consumers, as customers, as citizens, right? And I think somewhere the deep-rooted purpose of an organization really comes to light, and that's where we really think back, and sometimes you feel how grateful each one of us are, right? Whether as employees or as consumers, right? To be in a world where there is care and support across. Coming to your question on transformation and really metamorphosis, and Sarajit, you explained that very lucidly, right? To really look at metamorphosis as something beyond transformation, right? Because metamorphosis brings in that aspect of beauty of evolution, right? Transformation tends to be a little bit drier, right? So really like the word metamorphosis. It is also about that the eventual form being so different from the original form that it is almost kind of unrecognizable unless you are kind of peering through a microscope and being part of that journey, right? So I think there is something really profound about looking at it as metamorphosis. Coming, Rakesh, to your question about holistic, I think that's really important because what happens in most large organizations, medium-sized organizations is you start with there is a risk that you start with a very functional perspective, right? And digital transformations typically either start with either technology or we start with process, because these are two big embedded teams in organizations. So if it's IT in the lead, you start with a tech perspective. If it is shared services or one of the process teams in the lead, then you start with a process perspective, right? Now, obviously, both these are important, but it's important to look at it in a 360 view, right? And the way I would look at it is, in addition to technology and process, which are no doubt very key pillars for this, right? It's also important to look at, I would say, three things. One is data, right? And data in the past used to be kind of either embedded in process or embedded in tech, but it's now become so important and so foundational I think many transformational projects fail because you don't recognize the centrality of data. The other is about people and organization, right? And I'm calling out both people and organization in the same breath. Organization is more the hard part of it as to how do you organize work and so on. But clearly there is a very important people dimension to it. And the third one is culture, right? So if you really want to look at it holistically, in addition to process and technology, which almost always gets considered properly, I think it's important we look at data, we look at people and organization, and particularly about culture, right? And I think, and culture in particular, and I know we'll get a chance to talk more about this, how much are we embracing change versus resisting change, right? And Sarajit made a very valid point, right? And how does an organization today gear itself for change, right? Do we have a theme of continuous improvement, right? Or is there a risk of kind of staying static, right? Are we integrated end to end, or do we kind of work in very functional silos, right? And last but not the least, the whole theme around agile, right? Now, agile used to be more in the software world, but today we talk about agility in organizations as much, right? So are we an agile organization, or are we kind of wedded to a blueprint which has been laid down and we kind of resist anything which comes across? So I think for any of this to succeed, it's really important for us to look at it holistically. And I'm sure all of us have seen experiences, good and bad, where either adopting this or not adopting this can be a big determinant of success or failure.
No, thanks, Ravi. I think very well placed your point, and I think it was a good pick in terms of saying the metamorphosis has to be seen as an evolution and much beyond even transformation. And I think it is all about how the change or the shape or the form happens, which is unrecognizable, is very, very critical. And sometimes that's true with the kind of things we do. Sometimes we don't even recognize it or visualize that change which has already happened, and so on and so forth. And I think you talked about some of these, which is very interesting: the data, people, organization, and culture. And again, I have a specific point on it. I'll come back to you on this. On this whole tech started or tech initiated or process initiated. This is another area which I wanted to build further to understand what you mean by that and how it should be seen, and so on and so forth. But I'll just come back to you before I just build a question to Amar. This holistic thing has a bit of very interesting combination, and given the kind of organization you have represented, you would have seen IT sometimes it appears to be slightly more ahead of the curve because of the kind of maturity, the kind of the kind of SaaS, BPaaS, etc., all that thinking, and IT is much ahead as compared to sometimes the business processes.
Sure.
And also there'll be organizations, and I'm aware of the organizations you have represented, where there is a combination of legacy technologies and there's an advanced technologies or cutting edge technologies which you're trying to bring in. How do you look at the holistic in that context? How do you manage that holistic in that context? If you can just share your experience, will be helpful.
Yeah, look, I think, Rakesh, firstly, thank you for inviting me to this forum. I really look forward to sharing some of the thoughts of mine and obviously learning from the rest of the panel here as well. Look, in my experience in many organizations, when I've seen or gone in, and I'll give you a classic example I've seen walking into some organizations. You're right, and many times we've gone in and said, look, we need to fix up the IT area first, because that's the area that everybody comes to and goes, well, that's the broken piece. Yeah, and it's not necessarily always the case. I think Sarajit said it correctly as well. It's sometimes the processes, sometimes it's the culture, sometimes it's the organization, etc. And at times you've just got to take on the piece that you can take on and run with. Yeah. So what's in your control? And the example I'll give you is, I've walked into an organization where the help desk is broken, for instance. Yeah. And we need a tool and we need the processes, etc., to fix it. We've looked at the tool and gone, well, we can fix up the IT processes. There's probably 4 processes that need fixing. And then all of a sudden, the rest of the business starts going, well, IT is getting more efficient. Why can't we get on? So then supply chain gets on, then legal gets on. And then, all the other parts of the business gets on that part of the shared services areas. The challenge I see with that is that everybody forgets that the customer is the centric piece. Yeah. And what I mean by that, I'll give you a very, very simple example that many people on this panel and probably people listening will resonate with. I want my password reset. Yeah. Now, which password do I want reset? Do I want my legal password reset? Do I want my IT password reset? Because sometimes there's 500 applications in the place. You'll raise a ticket. It goes to IT. IT goes, well, we can't do this. It has to go to HR. Yeah. And HR then goes, well, it's not us. It has to go to payroll. But everybody's forgetting the centric in this whole scenario is actually the client, the customer at the end, who is the person who's generating the revenue and is the person who's ultimately servicing your client at the other end. And I think that's often what we find is many businesses look very narrow. They look within their own divisional areas. They don't look holistically. So that's the first piece. I think that word that you used earlier, holistic, is encapsulates that whole piece. How do you holistically look at an organization, but from a client perspective, sitting in the client's shoes, not in your shoes, not in ITs, not in payrolls, not in HRs, because we are there just to serve everybody else. And then the other one is what I often see is incremental change. So people go, well, you know what, we'll fix that one little process up or we'll tweak that little process up, but they forget to look at the whole password reset, or let's even go beyond that, onboarding, offboarding process. That's actually the piece above it. Yeah. So that whole process is not looked at. So then what happens is you end up tweaking it incrementally, not doing it holistically and not doing what Sarajit rightly pointed out, how do you move from a caterpillar to a butterfly, that metamorphosis. You need to change and think of that as a complete, how do I morphosize this organization from a scratch pace. So to me, I think too many times I've seen organizations do the incremental change and not a holistic change and a holistic radical change. In many ways, I see COVID is driving digital transformation. We've argued for many years with CEOs and other parts of the business to say we need to change, and people don't listen. Normally they'll go, no, we don't need to do it. COVID has actually acted as a catalyst to push people forward. And I expect some of that will change. It's going to radically change some of the business model. It's going to radically change some of the processes. I think some of the processes also, what we think of as holistic processes in the past, there are going to be new processes coming in, completely new processes that we probably don't even realize and understand today. Whether it's to do with retail food delivery or it's to do with online banking. How do I do my banking without actually going into a branch, including things like loan papers and witnessing of signatures and all that sort of stuff. So if you start thinking of all of those, then you're going to start seeing some opportunity areas, because we're now able to radically change some organizations which we weren't able to do in the past. So that's, I think for me, that's probably the thing that resonates for me is when I start thinking about some of those pieces around holistic metamorphosis. And that's going to drive a lot of the culture changes, organizational changes, people changes, process changes, technology changes. So there's a huge amount of opportunity here that will come out of this whole radical impact that we're all seeing around the world at the moment. My other question to you would also, or my other point or observation is, we often look at organizations very centric to the organization itself. We're becoming more and more of a globalized world. Our processes are not local only anymore. Yes, we see, we're reliant on processes that are outside of us, and they're internationally reliant on other countries or other companies. So some of our processes, we need to start thinking, how do they work more efficiently end to end, not just within my end to end or within my little world. And I think, a simple example of getting a delivery of a set of clothes from India to Sydney here, it might go through 3 different companies: unpacked, packed, repacked, resent, rebadged, etc. Can you make that more efficient? Yes, you probably can. And that goes back to the old days of thinking Six Sigma processes, but you got to think Six Sigma in a wider world, okay? And I think that's, for me, is where I see more the holistic pieces coming in. So that's what I would like to share with the panel today.
Thanks, Amar. I think this few pointers are very practical, if I can say, in terms of looking at not looking at functional or divisional, and that is something I'm sure many of the panelists would have witnessed it. That every time it becomes very functional transformation, then becoming an organizational transformation, and that's where the change which you talked about, even a password reset can go. You just need to do a why to find that fix needs to be done in somewhere else, maybe the onboarding or offboarding process, not in just the way the help desk needs to work. But that's the way it starts. I think the second one I think was very again interesting was to look at this incremental change versus the holistic change, because sometimes and you actually use still a sophisticated word, if I can say, incremental change, arbitral colloquial to say it's like fixing it or just putting a band-aid to it in terms of and that's what also is sometimes seen as a transformation, rather stepping back and looking at it and so on and so forth. So I think these are a few very practical points. Just building on that to Pramod, I think Pramod, you represent an organization which is really disrupting a lot of these with the RPA and the bots, and at the same time with no conflicts on this panel, but you also have a customer sitting on the panel as well, right? And now, good, bad, ugly experience is a separate point. We're not getting there. We're just talking about the point which I want to build on is this whole RPA is a good place to start, as we have seen in the last couple of years on some of these digital transformation. How do you, as an organization, when you walk in this kind of scenarios? How do you look at the holistic? How do you play a role in driving that holistic readiness? Pramod.
So, yeah, well, it's great to be part of the panel, especially with two customers on the panel. And Rakesh, thanks for inviting me and inviting our organization to this. I was also going to make a comment that looks like you may start a new class of conferences called Digital Metamorphosis 1.0 and then 2.0 and things like that. So I think that's going to start very soon. I think you're raising some, very good question about the RPA and the role of RPA maybe in the preparedness of the organizations towards digital changes. I think before I go there, I probably want to maybe capture a couple of things that are happening around us. And they're happening because I think over the last 30 years or so, roughly, and I've been in the industry from an enterprise software perspective for about 22, 23 years now, right? So I think fundamentally the technology has changed in the last couple of decades, right? It has become a lot more user-centric. And what it has also done through the digitization of a variety of things inside any enterprise, that it has created a ton of digital assets and understanding of how digital works. And so today, when you come to COVID as an example, what you saw in terms of our readiness to face the COVID challenges, and I think there's a lot of talk about how quickly we were able to address the challenges faced by COVID. It has happened entirely because I think a lot of preparedness happened over the last 20, 25 years into understanding digital and how to use these tools to make your life or processes or what have you better, right? I think, so that's a very important part to understand about what happened with the COVID related changes. Now, if you now project yourself out 2 to 3 years, right, what you would see is that the COVID, I think, forced certain behavioral changes in organizations, people, citizens, whatever role people are playing in societies and organizations. And I think what this would do is it's going to lead to a fundamental rethink. I think all the panelists have talked about this, as to should the business continue the way it does its business today, right? So if you look at customer service, right, should I necessarily call into a call center? are there much models to go and get the information I need rather than calling a call center, right? So I'm not saying call center will be redundant, but maybe the function of call center will change fundamentally, right? So I think when we think about metamorphosis or digital transformation, I think we have to really think about what is really changing at the ground level, right? And as leaders, I think they have to have a very keen eye and or rather ears attached to the ground to say what is changing in my organization, right? And align the whether it is a digital pursuits or other kind of projects, they have to be aligned to that fundamental change that's happening. I think in that regard, when you now think about the automation tools like RPA, AI services, and all of that, I think what you really then think about is that as employees, as citizens, our ability to use digital tools has significantly changed, right? Whether it is maybe through the use of WhatsApp, through the use of Facebook, through the use of email, or any of the, very difficult to use corporate applications, right? But that ability to use digital tools has fundamentally changed. I can now be a creator, right? So from the producer-led economy, from a software apps perspective, I think it is changing into creator-based economy, where as a user, I can determine how I want to use the software tools for my own purpose, right? And I'll give one very small example where I was watching my daughter taking these 10-year-old daughter taking online classes and doing homework. On the iPad, I was seeing her that she takes the photo of a worksheet. Then she creates that into a writing pad where she does the math sums right on top of it. She gets the answers and she records it on the piece of paper and takes the photo of the paper and submits it to the class. So she's literally has changed the concept of the slate. Right? I grew up with slate and chalk. Right now, this is like entirely different digital behavior that she's able to discover herself. Nobody had to teach her anything about how to use this and to use the systems in this way, right? But I find that fascinating, right? I find that fascinating because today the tools have come to a level, and I think somebody made a comment earlier that IT keeps ahead of the game, right? I think today, I believe IT is actually behind, right? If you look at our Zoom experience today, Zoom experience is not at all, or if you look at the way the computers are configured around their speaker systems and ability for you to interact with the voice systems and write at the same time, computer is very inadequate system right now, right? So I think this change that's happening at the very fundamental level, where the user is much more educated about digital tools, I think as an organization, we have to truly metamorphosize ourselves. We have to understand and leverage this power, right? And in that power, I think Hari's comment about being agile is very, very important, because in agile, the philosophy of software development changed from a prescribed 2 to 3 year software delivery goal to defining 3 months, 6 months, 12-month cadences to say, this is the change I want to go through, right? And the teams came together to build that change and make that change happen, right? I think same thing is very possible if you have a very holistic way of understanding and bringing together people who are going to be responsible for that metamorphosis. So if you think about holistic readiness for the metamorphosis, you have to include people in it, right? And you have to include people in a very agile fashion where people are given the goals, where they can come together and figure these things out with the help of the appropriate tooling, right? So I think that will then drive the cultural change, because now people are responsible. And that's another point both Sarajit and Harishankar also made, that cultural change is important. But that happens when you empower the people, not just with tools, but also with objectives and saying that you can really determine your destiny. And I think we have fortunately come to a point where that is possible. So that's my opening comment on this.
No, thanks, Pramod. I think a couple of examples and the way the environment on the digital and IT has changed, and the way as you rightly gave example of the young the kid, and I can relate with it because I have a similarly old daughter who also has his own online classes in the morning, and I can see the similar kind of experience, that how these kids are getting too used to this digital environment much faster than what we have been exposed to, or we sometimes even use in our life these days. And that connects back. Now, I still have a question which I have not got full responsibility, Pramod. So I'll come back to you on that. And you want to add it separately. So, but I just had an interesting, a recall of a comment, Sarajit, in one of the meetings long back in Jamshedpur, I heard from you. And there are two questions. This one question and the second question of business transformation. So one was, I remember you talking about, there was some discussion around the, HR systems. And with the workers in Tata Steel environment, you talked about there's many of these workers, you're still assuming them to be, duds, while they go back home and use the smartphone so well. So how some of these HR systems also needs to, connect with those. So just maybe it will be good to hear quickly from that, how you look at, for manufacturing company, and as you said, deeply rooted 100 years, the people have sense of pride working for that company and so on and so forth. But the change is something which is not so easy. The environment is changing, as even Pramod was talking about. The environment is changing. Everybody is getting to smartphone, mobility, etc. But you still walk into the shop floor. That methodology of attendance taking or some of this are still, those legacy and traditional. So how do you drive that change, both from the environment and technology point of view, as well as taking these people and the culture of the organization together? Maybe a couple of examples will be helpful, Sarajit. And then you can connect to this whole point of business transformation beyond digital transformation.
No, so first of all, thanks, Rakesh. And I really listening very intently to a lot of the comments that the fellow panelists were making. So one kind of disclaimer before I go into this segment. I think whatever I say in this segment, take it in the light of this comment that Tata Steel is not doing everything that it can or everything that it should in digital. Having said that, we have a philosophy that there are 6. We are looking at connectedness as the main driver. So we had a digital script, and that kind of acronym unfolded as scalable, connected, rapid, intelligent, personalized, and technology IT OT integrated, because we have a lot of operational technologies and we said a good movie needs to have a good script. So if digital is going to run as a good movie, it needs to have a good script for people for it to find it relevant, to engage, and to do what we are expecting them to do. And then we have another core belief that what got us here will not get us there. So last year, we came up with Script 2.0, where we are saying that it is about startups. So, speed, agility, scale, that's the topic that we were discussing. We are saying C is about cognitive, because I think, Mark Anderson made the comment almost 8 years ago that software is eating the world. We now believe it is AI eating software. There are now stands for resilience, because the cybersecurity in the world is about a 1 trillion market if you're a thief, and only a 350 billion market, of course, growing at double digits if you are the police. So it's better to be a thief, and that in the game of the cops and robbers will always be ahead, but you would rather be a cop. And I really stands for innovation, because the pressure on us to do more with less was never so much, and you're not going to do it by subscribing to what is the definition of madness, is that you give the same stimulus, which is more of continuous improvement, more of process, and expect a different response. I mean, how often do we do that? P really stands for platformatization, because if you see in this world today, the top 10 companies in the world which have market cap more than the top economy in the world collectively are all 7 of them are platform players, and the balance 3 are actually quasi platform players. So it's only platformatization that can drive, and if you look at T, it is all about talent, because it's ultimately the people who are going to do it for you. All these fantastic things were not built by machines yet; they were still, and that there brings me to the joke. I remember Rajan Anandan was once needling me on the stage, saying, "Look, you guys are making steel," and he does that very well. I have the highest respect for him. But I did ask him a question at that time, and I said, "Look, which is a more digital company, Google or Tata Steel?" And I said, "Let's raise our hands. Who is Google?" And I raised my hand as well. It's Google. But then let me ask a rhetorical question, which is, in 110 years of Tata Steel's existence, nobody has ever touched a ton of steel and lived to tell the tale. But Google is still saying wanted human help, having coders, 40,000 employees. It's just the way that you think. And I think that thinking really is what drives it. So just coming to our 6 core philosophies, we believe that digital for us, or business transformation would be about connected people. So what we have done in Jamshedpur is, for our COVID tracking and also for the connected workforce, we have said surveillance, security, productivity, health, and safety are not disconnected concepts. So we have put in about 19,000 beacons, which are beaconing at 100 milliseconds. We have put in 75,000 pickup Suraksha cards, which can track a person to where they are, because I don't know if you've seen a steel plant, but it's like a city. And we have other locations like Normundi, and we have other steel plants now in India. And so we pick up this data. This requires us to do about 163 billion records every millisecond of transaction processing, which we are using some scalable software to do. And we are able to we have this entire COVID platform that we have built up, and we are now looking at saying, if you are a company which needs this, we are happy to sell this to you. So that's the other point that is being made, that which in a way Pramod was making, that you will get into newer and newer areas, which so this is about our connected workers, right? And everybody's carrying the Suraksha card, and they're having to fill these forms every 7 days to come in, etc., etc. There is this second philosophy, which is connected assets. So we have our fleet management services. We are tracking these heavy duty dumpers and mining equipment and payloaders and excavators in back of beyond in places like Normundi and Joda that you may not even heard of. And other thing that we are doing there is we have taken about all our equipment, and we are looking at taking that into predictive asset maintenance, something we call the maintenance technology roadmap. How can we predict the failure of an equipment, and then we kind of maintain it before it fails? And so there are a lot of sophisticated algorithms trying to achieve that. Then it talks about connected operations, which is where everything comes together. The silo philosophy that Amar was talking about, that operation process is 100% efficient. I picked the call in 3 seconds. I responded in 10 seconds. And the response was, as per the protocol, a standard operating procedure. I had only devised this as a script saying, you need to go to X. Okay. So that's brilliant. So connected operations is all about that not happening. Then it's about connected customers. I think Amar said that in all of this, sorry, I know all of you, if there's any international people, then we jokingly called customers as Kasht Se Mar, which is die of pain. So, people are kind of in vernacular language. So we make sure that the connected, and this was a point that we took a lot out. You need to build customer in rather than company out. We don't want to take our business concrete, which is I want to have more efficient customers. I want to increase market share. I want to have a price premium. That is business concrete. The customer has got nothing to do with it. The customer wants to operate. The customer wants to keep their mills running. The customer needs a different price proposition. The customer needs me to serve him when his factory is unlocking. And the customer needs me to help with him with this product development. I mean, that's why we exist. Otherwise, we don't exist to make our business concrete cleaner. We exist to make our customers happier, serve them well. Yeah. So that's the connected customer part. Then there is this shared services part, because I think, since this is a shared services forum, we've kind of moved a lot away from it. So there are customer transactions, so connected transactions. All of us know on the back of our palms that the AR process, the procure to pay process, runs across supply chain, runs across finance, runs across procurement, has HR options onto it also as to make versus buy, but procure to pay. The order to cash, it has got a marketing and sales function, it has got collections, it has got finance, it has got transaction, order to cash, finance, record to report. It's got a lot to do with the quality of the data, as Hari was saying. And somehow we kind of pretend that we live in outer space and we don't know the organizations when we're talking about some of these things. I don't know whether it suits us or that's the default. I have, and I find myself doing this. So I'm as guilty as anyone else. And lastly, connecting all of this, all these 5 large connections, these are hubs in themselves, is what we called connected decision making. We've got an integrated margin monitor philosophy that we are trying to drive, where right from what you should buy, where you should buy, how you should buy, what you should make, where you should make, how you should make, what you should transport, where you should stock, how you should go at an operational level, as well as the strategic level as to where your plant should be there, where your people should be there, which are the businesses that you get into. Can you make these decisions connected? So that's kind of the 6 connected, large connected nodes. And we would like to believe that we are going ahead with this with the core simplicity of network philosophy, which is the power of a network. And Amar was talking about this, that you're no longer a value captain in a linear chain. In 1986, we used to be India's premier company. We are acutely aware that in many definitions today, we are not by a mile. And so you can't have a.
Sorry to interject, Sarajit. I think just into the time, just trying to build on a couple of quick points.
Sorry.
Yeah. So I think I think you made a good 2 quick points, and I will just take that points from Hari as a quick comment on that. I think when you talked about this whole business processes, people call it like P2P, and it's obviously cuts across multiple functions. And we have seen many times you talk about the shared services, they will say I'm doing P2P, but while they are doing only accounts payable, which is I2P, right? They're not really doing purchase to pay. Or they will say O2C, but they're doing only AR or cash receipting, only AR, and on the AR only the cash receipting, not even order management or not even receivables management, not even DSO, etc., etc. Now the second thing is connecting to the shared services, and that is where I wanted to get a sense from you, Hari, because you have been part of this GICs becoming GCCs. Now with this name change of this capability center, the question is basically how you think this GCCs or the shared services can really play a role, a pivotal role, or can become a fulcrum to drive those holistic readiness for the organization. Because you talked about this initiated from technology, initiated from the process. So how do you see the GCC or shared services really can play a role, pivotal role here? Now, before I just get to this question, I wanted to request the host there's a poll for the audience. If that poll can be triggered, there's a question to the audience, and even the panelists can even respond to that poll. I request host to just please, there's a poll here. Even the panelists can go for this poll, please. Another 15 seconds before we just close this. I think the panelists have done, and I think even the audience must have done it. So good for now. Just please close the poll. So Hari, back to you for that question which I was talking about, how the shared services of GCC can become the pivot or the fulcrum to drive some of this holistic readiness.
Yeah. No, I think that's really interesting and important, right? Because if you take the evolution of GCCs, right, the first generation was what used to be called captive centers. Right now, I know that word is kind of banned in the industry today, right? We don't call captive centers. That was very much on the back of arbitrage. Then we moved to GICs, which were global in-house centers, which were very holistic. It got IT and process, kind of co-located that, right, and kind of it moved up the value chain. And today we see ourselves as really global digital and intelligent process kind of centers, right? And even for us in Kimberly Clark, we have established a center now. We're a little over a year old, right? But again, clearly we see ourselves as a third generation global capability center, which kind of is starting digital without having to kind of go through, generation 1 and generation 2. And if you see, on your question on how can the GCCs, or, if you have more than one GCC, it's kind of almost a constellation of these GCCs, how can they be the core for driving, this kind of metamorphosis? It comes back to, how do we see IT and process play together in this space, right? And in some ways, you can see that, IT is supporting processes in transformation. Equally, shared service centers and global capability centers are supporting IT. And for a big digital transformation, right, you need to have this kind of a core expertise center where you are able to co-locate experts, bring the best, be able to integrate across organizational silos, where people are thinking for the enterprise as a whole as opposed to the functions they represent. And shared services can be that big foundation on which you could launch a big transformation, right? In the absence of that, right, what would happen, right? For a global organization, you need to house this in multiple fragmented business units, right? And then the orchestrating it across those units is a challenge in itself, right? Once you have a credible shared service setup, and similarly, once you have a credible, global digital center, these two, ideally together, right, they can be the foundation for launching a big global digital transformation. Without that, we will be kind of searching for a home to house any of these.
No, absolutely. Thanks, Hari, for that point. I think and really can relate with it. And I think one other point I think even Sarajit was talking about, and even I hear from you, Hari, is that it's also about as an organization we believe in something called BIC to BICs, and again a jargon or acronym we have created, BIC to BIC. It's about best in class to best in context. Each company's environment is different. How you relate with that based in class practices and bring it back to your organization is very, very important. So the definition of digital in Google and versus Tata still is different, and it's contextual. Moving to Pramod, back to you with the similar question, which I was just trying to get a little bit more understanding of this, specifically this RPA, and as we're saying RPA, AI, ML, etc. But I think before there are a lot of AI, ML, blockchain, etc., people are talking about, and some are really adopting it. I've seen even sometimes they're embracing it. Because there's a lot of buzz around it, and blockchain is used like even a workflow in some of the cases and so on and so forth. But looking at RPA as you go for some of these deployments, looking at how to drive that, as a pivoting of that or starting point of that digital transformation, how do you connect with the organization, understand the organizational readiness, and connect back to a plan of getting it executed, resulting into some strategic objective or benefits? It could be even a business case, whatever. If you can just really share how you really look at and how, what has been your experience of delivering some of that for the organization? I'm just mindful of the time, so request maybe a brief responses from here on from everyone. If you can just share something, it would be very helpful, Pramod.
Great question. So one of the things that we have seen work really well in driving value out of automation, I think this is true of other digital projects also, is how do you find out what change the business is aspiring to take on, right? And what is their preparedness from a technology perspective, their own skills perspective, people perspective. So change management in some automation projects used to be a challenge. It's not a challenge anymore. So I think over the years, what we realized is that a center of excellence kind of model has generally helped organizations in essentially seeding this idea of automation in the center of digital transformation, right? So if you have a COE centered on automation and AI technologies, it tends to have that credibility within the organization that it can shape the road the organization can take in making changes with the help of the automation technologies, right? So this RPA COE, for example, can have participation from process owners or business leaders from different organizations. It can become that hub of ideating, brainstorming, and driving to what is next. And then once you have that internally credible organization, then the seeding of ideas, spotting opportunities, because these people are also then part of critical business meetings, right? Where they're hearing what changes business is trying to drive to, right? So they can become part of the whole conversation from its genesis to execution. So I think what we have seen is if you take a COE kind of approach, the chances of success are better in getting those automation projects done.
Yeah, so I think very, very rightly said it. It's again, how do you focus on it, how you create that COEs, etc., becomes very, very important. I think, and I can see Sarajit is doing very well with some of the Q&A responses. I request, there are some questions, even one question is there for you, Hari. So if you can just find, you can even chat in the Q&A and respond it. We'll find time, we'll come back to respond live. But if you guys can, in between, if you can just even respond, will be helpful. Amar, just wanted to build a question to you and just check, how much you think these business cases which are created of these digital transformations are real, and how much these are something which is created to get a management approval versus can be really actualized. What's your sense and experience on that?
Look, I think any business case, a good accountant can make it look positive, right? Or negative, whichever way you want to look at it. And my experience has always been that. I think more than that, though, Rakesh, a lot of businesses or a lot of organizations don't even do that. They don't even get to the point of saying, well, where's my return on this? Where's my internal rate of return on this project? My experience has been, at least in the BFSI world, I know they're very good. They're extremely numbers focused. And I don't know if you know, but because obviously from a BFSI world, they will move the numbers to where they want. But in other organizations that I've worked in who are probably not so finance literate as such, the accountants will obviously be aware of some of that. But generally you'll find the business heads will not be. That they will make the numbers as they need. And often they won't even know how they built their project. If you actually ask them, did you do a work breakdown structure for your project? Was it really going to cost? Is it going to be 100 man hours or is it going to be 1,000 man hours? It's probably usually a wild guess that people have made. So my experience has been mixed. I've seen some that have been extremely good, and I've seen some that have been extremely poor as well. And I think it's also dependent on the organizational maturity of particular organizations and how they actually work through some of that building. And that rolls then into the deployment piece as well. I think we touched earlier that we talked about COEs. There's a lot of companies out there that do not have a PMO, a project, a COE. How do you actually run a project and change within an organization? Often what people do, or often what companies do, is they will drag out 10 people out of their normal day-to-day role and go, okay, you're part of this change team now. And off you go make that change happen. Are they really geared for change? Do they have the skills to be able to do that? Do they understand what needs, how to deliver that? So often you find that also is not as mature as it should be in many organizations that I've seen. But there are organizations that I've seen got a very strong methodology, but that can work the other way too, because sometimes people get stuck in the method and the process rather than the outcome of what they're looking at. And again, I've gone into companies where I've looked at projects and had to shut them down because they're not delivering value to the organization. They're 3/4 of the way through it, and all of a sudden people have realized this is not going to deliver value. So I think my experience has been very, very mixed though, in both sides. And you've got to also ask yourself, a lot of the startups that we have today, many of them do not have a business case, Rakesh. They basically will go, we're going to go out and disrupt the world. If you look at some of the companies that we see that are up in the US now, many of them are there just purely because they want to disrupt the world. They're not even looking at the business case. So I think it's shifting. The older methodology of everything having a business case is now shifting to the startup saying, well, no, we're just going to do a startup and see where we lead. And some of the traditional companies are still trying to build business cases and value behind that. So that's my experience of what I've seen around the organizations around the APAC region.
Sure. Thanks, Amar. I know I'm just running out of my time. The next panel people are coming in. But I'll just extend by 3-4 minutes and a quick rapid fire with all of us. And just a request, keep your responses as brief as possible. So Sarajit, going back to the same question on this business case, done multiple times this business cases. How do you see what is couple of things which is must to have to deliver on this business case?
Sharp use case, set of people who are going to do it, resources, 7 R's basically. You need a roadmap, you need the results, you need the resources, you need a RISI matrix, you need a review structure, you need a reward and recognition for all the people, and there are risks in life, you need a risk mitigation strategy. That's it from my side.
Very nice, thank you. Hari, just looking at from a digital point of view, and we're talking about digital transformation maturity, and we are in this run-off sometimes with this environment as Pramod was talking about. Looking from that point of view, how do you see benchmarking your current organizational digital maturity with the industry sometimes, comparable though, but looking at, and some processes like, we're talking about some corporate processes, and typically in shared services like P2P or P2C, we were talking about a little while earlier, they are pretty much, if I can given with a lot of quotes, could be industry agnostic, right? So how do you look at that digital maturity being compared to the industry? Is it relevant, required, and how do you look at sometimes doing that?
No, I think it's very, very true and very relevant, right? So I think a sharp distinction between commoditized processes where you're aiming for scale and maximum efficiency and speed versus differentiated processes where you're aiming for a strategic outcome which is going to impact the top line and bottom line and how we serve our customers and consumers. I think that sharp differentiation is really important when we aim for any digital transformation.
Thanks, Hari. Amar, looking at, you talked about this divisional and organizational, and breaking those boundaries from end-to-end point of view. What will be the top 1 or 2 mantras you would like to give it to the people by saying when you are evolving your digital strategy or a program, how to not limit to a functional focus? How to make it organizational? Any experiential mantras you would like to share with the audience?
Look, I think usually you have to create a SWAT team outside of the functional line. I always say if you have people within the function, it's like people are stuck in doing their day-to-day job. They cannot see outside of that. So what you need to have is basically a group outside of that who can holistically look back in towards the organization. And that's a skill in itself, as I said earlier. Often what you find is, as I said, technologists get thrown into that, HR gets thrown into that, but usually they lack a good process person in there, a good business process person in there. And that would probably, what I would say is start with the business process, look at it holistically, set up a team separate to your line organization and drive that in. And that's probably the way I would look at it.
Absolutely, Amar. Thank you for that. And Pramod, the last question just to check with you is that, do you think post-COVID, the speed of this digital transformation, which we are talking about, I think one of the questions even came in the Q&A was, do you have any predictability as an organization by saying how this is going to really change after 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, from a change point of view? We are all talking about new normal, new normal, new normal. Have you really reached that new normal, or are you still thinking that it is just to be created? And how do you look at the next 12 to 24 months of the time for your organization?
I think I'm going to maybe make 2 observations. And one I learned just today when I was at the government, this Indian Express and Technology Sabha, where we had all the secretaries from the different health departments of different state governments. And what I was pleased to hear was that the pace of change that they are going through in adopting digital tools to fight COVID is just phenomenal, right? You would not expect that from government to be, but to be fair, they're doing an incredible job in using whatever tools they have available to use them very effectively to manage COVID, right? We may have disagreement about how well they're managing it or not, but it's a tough job. And I think they've learned really well how to use the digital tools to make that happen, right? So that's one data point. The other data point that I can give you is that I think almost in every deal that we are going into, we are seeing that customers necessarily want more, whether they are wanting it more from a business continuity perspective or driving the cost down. I think those imperatives for any company to be more profitable, more sustainable, they haven't really changed. And I think there is a realization today that the tooling and the platforms are available to make it happen. And the resistance within the organizations has completely gone away because of either cost pressure or the changing customer needs or changing employee needs. So we are already seeing that momentum building up, and I suspect that this will continue to happen.
Thanks, Pramod. I think I'm already overboard on the time. It was fantastic talking with each one of you, and I think I'm sure whoever has logged in live and the people who are going to watch it later on the shared services portal will be delighted to hear the perspectives from each one of you. Thank you, Sarajit, for fantastic perspectives. Thanks, Hari, for sharing some of the insights and your past experience, current experience. Amar, it was a delight to hear from you. I know it's very late in the evening for you. Thank you for joining late in the evening from Sydney. And thank you, Pramod, for bringing those perspectives around digital and how to look at future. So nice. Have a great day ahead. Thank you. The audience, please be connected. We will be switching to the panel 2, and the speakers are pretty much there logged in. They'll be just quickly appearing on the screen. Thank you all.